What's faster, scripting a quick user report in PowerShell or building a full-scale integration with Graph API? Most admins only discover the answer after wasting hours on the wrong tool. In this video, we break down the exact moment you should switch from scripts to code as your environment gets more complex. By the end, you'll know how to spot the signals it's time to step up your automation game and how to avoid the classic admin headaches. The basics, where scripts shine and code feels overkill. If you've spent any time with Microsoft 365 admin guides, there's a pattern you can't ignore. PowerShell commands pop up everywhere, no matter how many times Microsoft brags about APIs and cloud-native automation. If you're wondering why, you're not alone. Honestly, it feels a bit like showing up to an online seminar only to realize the presenter is still using PowerPoint 2010. PowerShell just keeps showing up, even as everything around it modernizes. Most admins don't start out wanting to become script junkies. You're trying to solve a real problem and you need something fast. The reality is, when you need to export a list of users or reset 100 passwords, you want to get it done and move on. Open your terminal, connect with a single command, and fire off something like get mailbox export CSV. Suddenly, what would have taken 20 minutes of clicking becomes a 2-minute task. It's not glamorous, but it's almost always effective for that first layer of admin work. Bulk mailbox exports, license assignment reports, user status queries. It all feels accessible in PowerShell. Even if you're not a developer, it's hard to beat the feeling of running a line or two and instantly seeing results in your CSV folder. But then there's that annoying catch. Things that seem simple on paper can go sideways faster than your Monday morning Teams call. Why do we keep reaching for PowerShell even when it slows down or starts throwing weird errors for no obvious reason? There's a comfort in using the same familiar CMDLets, but we've all seen someone stretching that comfort until it snaps. Sometimes it's stubbornness. More often it's because PowerShell feels like an old pair of sneakers you just can't throw out. And most guides still walk you through the basics using PowerShell. Take a real scenario, pulling a list of all Teams users into a CSV. In PowerShell, you're likely unpacking this with a single command, piping into export CSV, and calling it a day. That's your bread and butter workflow for quick reports. Try doing the same with Graph API and welcome to a handful of HTTP request steps, authentication tokens, pagination, output formatting, and a pile of JSON. Sure, you get the same end result, but you've gone from a shortcut to a maze. That initial simplicity is why PowerShell holds onto its crown for these basic high-frequency admin tasks. What makes PowerShell so efficient for this stuff comes down to speed, not how fast it executes, but how quickly you get from problem to solution. It's ideal for straightforward, repetitive jobs that need minimal fuss. You can run a one-liner to update a group display name across your tenant, or export a mailbox permissions report for your compliance team. Tasks where you know the parameters, you don't need elaborate workflows, and you just want reliable, readable output. These all fall squarely in the PowerShell sweet spot. Let's not pretend these scenarios are rare. The day-to-day headaches of user management, ad hoc reports, onboarding checklists, or even mass disabling accounts, PowerShell eats that for breakfast. These pain points make up most of the admin workload. That's a big reason why, even as APIs get more attention in developer circles, admin guides and help desk articles still start with PowerShell as the default. When something breaks in production, it's much easier to copy-paste a snippet, hit enter, and confirm it worked than to troubleshoot an API connection or write error handling for a dozen endpoints. If you poke around Microsoft's documentation, you'll notice a theme. Guides for quick wins or getting started rarely open with Graph API. The recommended approach is more often a scripted one than a coded one. Even new Microsoft 365 features, until they mature, see their first admin tasks supported through a PowerShell module, sometimes even before they show up in the portal. There's real inertia here. Most admins are already fluent enough with the PowerShell verbs and nouns to get their work done. You don't need to decipher JSON output or set up a new app registration just to answer who still has an E1 license. But of course, there's a flip side. What happens when you need to work across workloads, say grabbing Teams, SharePoint, and Exchange data in one sweep? Or when you want to automate something end-to-end, reaching into systems outside Microsoft 365, suddenly the strengths of PowerShell get stretched. The boundaries show up faster than you might expect. Here's the kicker. PowerShell is the perfect sidekick. Right up until you ask it to fly, it's your best friend when you need practical results for common requests. But hang around the admin forums and you'll hear plenty of complaints, repeated 429 throttling, modules that lag behind M365 features, or complex multi-step scripts that only work when the wind blows in the right direction. And this is where things get interesting, because once that top layer of easy scripting is done, you start running into blockers that slow you down, not speed you up. That moment comes sooner every year as Microsoft 365 keeps adding new features and more moving parts. So what do you do when that simple script stops being simple? That's where PowerShell's armor starts to crack, and it's worth seeing exactly what breaks and how quickly. Cracks in the script when PowerShell hits its limits. If you've ever watched a two-line PowerShell script balloon out overnight, you know exactly how this happens. You start with a harmless chunk of code, a quick report or a script to set user attributes, and suddenly you're adding exceptions, trying to thread in data from another platform, and patching on workarounds for features that haven't rolled out yet. It's not that your intentions are bad. The problem is the more your environment grows or your business asks for just one more thing, the less your old script fits. Complexity ramps up in the background. The next thing you know, that quick fix has evolved into a multi-hundred line monster, tangled with if statements and unpredictable errors. Here's where those quiet cracks in PowerShell start to show. It often starts when you need to automate something that stretches beyond the basics. Maybe you're looking at cross-platform work, pulling data from both Teams and SharePoint, or trying to trigger an update across two different workloads at once. At first, you think this shouldn't be too bad. Then the caveats start stacking up. Now, you're having to juggle two different PowerShell modules, each with slightly different authentication quirks, and one of them hasn't been updated in months. So you're writing and rewriting code, trying to sidestep missing features, often inventing complexity just to keep up. There comes a moment where the script itself seems to groan under its own weight. Routines that used to be fast get bogged down. You're suddenly dealing with timeouts or hitting throttling errors for no obvious reason. Authentication is no longer just a single connect sole service line. It's a messy mixture of cached credentials, interactive pop-up prompts, and if your tenant uses MFA, a parade of extra steps that don't play nicely with scheduled automations. Debugging becomes something you do in self-defense, not because you're adding new value, but because a fragile block keeps breaking in new creative ways. One example that stands out is anything to do with automating Teams channel settings or managing SharePoint site collections. Let's say you want to bulk create Teams channels or adjust settings only available through the newest Teams admin experience. You check the PowerShell module only to find half the options are missing or locked behind preview releases. If you're working in SharePoint, you notice that site-level features lag months behind the rest of Microsoft 365, so your script either runs partial operations or throws vague errors. You dig through the change logs and realize the CMDLet simply doesn't exist. The reality is there's often a significant delay before these features hit the PowerShell side. This gets even more convoluted when you step into the mess of modules. Teams, Exchange Online, SharePoint, Azure AD, each with their own installation, connection methods, quirks, and occasionally conflicting dependencies. Sometimes different modules don't play nicely together on the same system. Some commands filter or output data differently than others. There's very little consistency. If you haven't had the joy of closing every PowerShell window on your desktop just to clear out a rogue lingering session, just wait. CMDLet gaps and broken compatibility crop up right when you're trying to automate something at scale. Microsoft's release cadence amplifies this chaos. It's common knowledge among experienced admins that Graph API usually receives the latest and greatest first. PowerShell modules, on the other hand, often trail by weeks or even months. You'll read feature announcements and find the REST endpoint ready, but the PowerShell equivalent still marked as coming soon. For fast-moving teams, that delay means either pausing your automation ambitions or resorting to convoluted workarounds that rarely age well. Authentication deserves its own chapter in the PowerShell pain library. As organizations ramp up security with multi-factor authentication and start requiring service principals for automation, scripting in PowerShell turns into a chore. PowerShell, by design, wasn't built for persistent, non-interactive logins tied to granular, least privileged permissions. Integrating things like app-based authentication or granular access, something standard in Graph API, is a challenge here. Schedulers fail, MFA prompts block unattended runs, and service accounts get stuck behind outdated module authentication flows. If all of this feels familiar, that's not a coincidence. At some point, you realize you're not improving your script, you're patching duct tape onto duct tape, hoping nothing critical falls off while you're on vacation. The PowerShell solution that felt so nimble at the start is now slower, less reliable, and honestly more stressed than it's worth. If you find yourself wrangling a script that looks more like a lab experiment than a reliable tool, that's the clearest signal it's time to reconsider your approach. This is what nudges advanced admins to think beyond scripting. PowerShell did its job until the environment moved faster than the tools supporting it. Those pain points aren't personal failures, they're just the natural outcome of a platform evolving in real time. Once you reach a certain level of complexity, something has to give. The demand for cross-platform integration, always-on authentication, and access to bleeding-edge features outpaces what PowerShell can offer. That's not a flaw with PowerShell. It's a sign of Microsoft 365's shifting priorities. And that's where Graph API steps in, not as a more complicated version of PowerShell, but as a different tier, one aimed at real integrations, not just quick fixes. If PowerShell now feels like a patchwork of legacy and workarounds, you're ready to ask what Graph API actually opens up, the places scripts just can't reach, but modern business workflows demand. So let's cut straight to that. What does working with Graph API make possible that scripting never could? Graph API, the leap from scripts to code. When you finally hit the ceiling with PowerShell, the next logical step is the Graph API. The Graph API isn't a slightly upgraded scripting tool. It's the front door to every major Microsoft 365 data source, users, groups, mail, teams, planner, you name it. Instead of bouncing between different modules and patchwork solutions, you plug directly into Microsoft's core API surface. Suddenly, you're not just running admin commands, you're building integrations that can span multiple workloads and even multiple tenants. Most admins feel that leap as a real shift. It's the difference between running a few favorite scripts and building automations that plug seamlessly into business workflows or third-party systems. Of course, this isn't just a more button you press. Coding against Graph API doesn't mean you stick your PowerShell habit into a bigger command window. You're rewriting how you think about automation. With Graph, everything speaks HTTP. Every action is a post, get, put, or delete. Your authentication moves from a pop-up credential box to the world of OAuth and app registrations. The requests are built on JSON, not the tidy objects PowerShell spits out. In practice, this all means you have to manage authentication tokens, error handling, and sometimes pagination, not just drop in a CMDLET and hope for the best. For IT pros used to scripts that just work, it's a different headspace. Let's put a real-world lens on it. Cross-tenant user provisioning, setting up users in multiple organizations without a human in the middle just isn't possible using PowerShell modules alone. Or maybe your business wants teams to trigger custom business logic whenever a new channel is created. Forget a script for that. With Graph API, you can hook Teams events directly into Azure Functions or Logic apps, instantly bridging M365 and your in-house systems. That integration doesn't just collect data, it kicks off workflows across everything you connect. End result, you move from stopgap scripts to scalable, robust processes nobody has to babysit. This is the kind of thing that actually impresses the folks outside the IT department, not just your fellow admins. The other big superpower, Graph API, gets the new features first. Microsoft's investment focus here is impossible to miss. When Planner introduced new project templates, when Teams shipped private channels, Graph API endpoints were available almost immediately. Meanwhile, admins waiting for the same controls in PowerShell saw coming soon for weeks, sometimes months. For businesses chasing early access to capabilities or looking to control bleeding edge features, Graph unlocks the door far earlier. It's not just about getting access faster, it's being able to build the tools your business needs before the competition. And then there's the data itself. PowerShell can get you a lot, but Graph API opens up the full spectrum: fine-grained mailbox stats, deep file analytics, org relationships, calendar insights, device compliance status. The aggregation across workloads means you avoid the nasty blind spots where PowerShell modules miss out or handle output inconsistently. Through Graph, every product surface is an endpoint, and those endpoints usually respond in a single, well-documented format. Moving to Graph, you also meet the reality of modern authentication. OAuth-based access opens up automation that's both more secure and more granular, service principals, application permissions, and scope-based access that let you build for least privilege at scale. Instead of interactive logins or shared admin accounts, you register an app, grant it tightly controlled access, and manage everything with real security posture. No more breakage the moment security teams flip the MFA switch, and it's far easier to automate without somebody glued to a keyboard. This kind of architecture also makes integration practical. Graph API plays natively with Power Platform, Azure Functions, and Logic apps. Initiate a Logic app workflow every time a new file is uploaded to SharePoint. Simple. Trigger a Power Automate process from a Teams event. It's just an API call away. Think about automations running overnight across tenants with logging, retry policies, and compliance tracking all baked in. Suddenly, your Microsoft 365 workflows don't just sit in a console, they become part of a living, breathing ecosystem connected to whatever your business cares about. Here's where admins who once bounced between PowerShell windows start to see a different kind of payoff. Building with Graph API is about more than conquering technical complexity. It's about unlocking business agility. The investment stings up front, no question. You'll spend time thinking about HTTP request structure, authentication tokens, and error codes. But what you get back is future proofing, automations that scale, stay current with Microsoft's roadmap, and fit into nearly any solution your business adopts next. Meanwhile, models for update, permission, and management fit with the kinds of tools that larger organizations expect IT teams to know. But before everyone jumps into writing code and spinning up app registrations, there's a second wave of reality waiting. What does it actually mean to support, maintain, and evolve all these new automations you're creating? That's when the switch from scripts to code starts asking a different set of questions. One's about who owns your automation future and what it takes to keep these new integrations running long term. Maintenance, support, and the real cost of progression. If you've moved projects from straightforward PowerShell scripts to Graph API automations, you've felt that change in your day-to-day. At first, it feels like trading up, your reach expands, integrations improve, things get easier to automate at scale. But the upgrade comes with a new flavor of headaches, especially if you're stepping into the world of full-blown API-driven automation for the first time. Editing a PowerShell script is one thing. Maintaining a graph-based process as new versions roll out and business priorities shift can feel a lot more like software development than admin work. There's often a sense of trading one kind of fragility for another. Scripts are brittle, but code can turn into a puzzle nobody wants to reassemble 6 months later. This is where voice of experience really matters. The move from scripts to code isn't just about technical uplift. It's about bringing on an entire layer of maintenance you probably haven't faced before. Think about it. PowerShell scripts are usually lightweight files, sometimes even written on the fly to respond to a one-off need. You save them in a share, set up a quick task scheduler, maybe share the script in the IT chat, and hope it lingers for future emergencies. There's little ceremony. Everyone on the team knows it's there. Debugging usually means opening the script in Notepad and seeing who forgot a variable. Graph API, on the other hand, is rarely a solo admin's side project. The weight of the work starts to mirror real software development more than your classic break-fix mindset. You deal with versioned endpoints, meaning the API you called last month might behave differently today. You have to follow change logs, watch for upcoming breaking changes, and even if your code still runs, test to make sure its output hasn't silently shifted. That's the kind of thing that sets alarms off for teams who once treated automations like set-it-and-forget-it tools. Organizations end up needing documentation, clearly defined process owners, and sometimes even a lightweight service management cycle. Most admins get that scripts are fragile, one deprecation, and your mailbox report script stops working after Patch Tuesday. But Graph API brings issues of its own. If Microsoft chooses to retire or modify an endpoint, your code might continue to run but deliver the wrong results, or it may fail in subtle, hard-to-detect ways. Unlike PowerShell, where you might lose a CMDlet and see a great big error, here you sometimes get empty responses or altered properties without notice. You're trading one form of risk for another. Now, your team has to keep tabs on release notes, participate in early adopter programs, and stay ahead of scheduled changes, not just react after the fact. Then there's the change in skill set required for ongoing support. PowerShell, despite its quirks, is approachable. Most IT pros pick it up because the pattern is clear: verb, noun, input, output, one result at a time. Graph API development shifts that conversation. You need to be comfortable with REST basics, parsing JSON, handling OAuth flows, and managing things like throttling or retry logic. Even if you know Microsoft 365 inside out, translating a business need into a robust API workflow demands new technical muscles. There's also more emphasis on error handling. With PowerShell, you rely on built-in catch blocks or test simple conditions. With APIs, traffic spikes, endpoint timeouts, and edge case bugs become everyday operational concerns. And it's not just about the code. The teams maintaining Graph API automations have to think like a mini development shop. They monitor integrations for health, track metrics, and set up alerts for unexpected failures. Ongoing improvement isn't optional. APIs evolve, business needs shift, and security requirements ramp up year by year. It isn't unusual for organizations to introduce light change management, code review, documentation standards, and even version control systems just for their M365 automations. Compared to the just run the script and see if it works philosophy of classic admin work, this is a big adjustment. Supportability also plays out differently. PowerShell scripts, when written clearly and kept simple, can be picked up and edited in a crunch. They're more likely to be shared in answer forums or posted to a team's chat thread for quick wins. But Graph API automations can be both a superpower and a black hole, depending on how you manage handover. Done right, robust documentation and clear architectural notes mean your business doesn't depend on one developer's memory. Skimp on that, though, and your future self, or whoever inherits the code, has hours of deciphering ahead. Here's the payoff, though. Investing the time and effort into scalable, API-driven automation does more than clear your to-do list. It actually scales with your business. As organizations grow and workflows cross boundaries across regions, departments, or even other SaaS apps, AP-based automations hold up where scripts buckle. Features like granular permissions, logging, and integration with enterprise toolchains aren't just nice-to-haves at that stage. They're the ways you avoid data leaks, reputational risk, or the chaos of having a dozen disconnected scripts living short, confusing lives in your file shares. The real difference maker between average admins and the ones who move the business forward sits right here. It's not just about picking PowerShell or Graph API. The best admins build a roadmap. They ask where agility actually matters and where reliability wins. They're flexible when it helps the business and firm about good practices when the cost of a mistake is too high. You don't get superpowers from your tool. It comes from understanding when to use each and how to plan for what comes next. So when you're eyeing that next automation, it's not just about asking if you can do it with a script or code. The real question is how you'll support it, scale it, and keep it breathing a year down the road when Microsoft 365 no longer looks like it did today. A lot of admins think picking PowerShell or Graph API is a declaration, like once you choose, you're locked in. The real advantage isn't about team loyalty. It's getting a read on when your daily headaches signal a real need to jump tools. PowerShell works until the environment or business goals demand more. Outgrowing scripts isn't about falling short. It's knowing you've outpaced the basics. Solutions only last when they match the scale of what you're solving. If you've run into a script that spiraled or built something clever with Graph, share your wins or your war stories in the comments.